Configuration variables, or CVs. What's all that about then? Now if you're a DC guy, just before you switch off, I'd just like to mention one thing. I do appreciate that it's very expensive to convert a DC layout to DCC. Well, that's actually not quite true. It's not that expensive to convert the layout, it's to convert your Loco stock. And if I can offer one piece of advice before you go down spending any more money, is if you're going to invest in locomotives, buy the ones that are DCC ready, because if you do change over, then at least it's only a case of buying a 20 or 30 pound chip. Whereas to convert a Loco, and you might have chassis problems and all sorts, then it does become much more expensive. And when you come to sell your locomotives on, you will always get a better price for DCC ready rather than DC only. So that's it. If you're DC and you had it now, I understand if you want to switch off. But if you want to perhaps learn something, then stick around. So I popped out to see a friend of mine the other day. Some of his locomotives weren't quite performing the way he'd hoped. And they were DCC fitted, some had sound. And it led me to believe that it was the CVs, the configuration variables, that weren't quite set to suit his layout. So we had a little look at them, and bewildering as it all is, we kind of fathomed it out, and hopefully I can share some of that information with you. There's no doubt some of you people will know far more about CVs than I will ever know, and you've probably forgotten more than I'll ever know. But this is what I've picked up, and this is what I've kind of put into best practice. One thing I do have is a kind of best practice, and when I buy a new locomotive, obviously I take it out the box, give it a test run and all the rest of it. But what I do then is, with the extra bits that come with it, I pop them in a little bag, and in this bag goes, you know, the head codes or the extra couplings or the snow plows and all the kind of bits and bobs you don't necessarily use every day. So these go into a bag, and then when I fit a decoder to the locomotive, also in this bag goes the blanking plate and a little label, as this one says, split head code class 37, so I know exactly what's in the bag. Call me sad, and some people often do, but I also have this binder, and in this binder I list all my locomotives. So I have the type of loco, the number it runs on, I have the colour of it, whether it has sound fitted, whether it has cab lights, and the type of decoder that I have fitted to it. And when I get the instructions from the locomotive, I staple to it the instructions that go with the DCC chip, whether it be a Bachmann 32.554 or whatever. I staple them together and I keep them in this binder, so I kind of don't go wrong. The other thing I put in there is when I go in and change and amend the CVs on a locomotive, I always then make a note of what I've done so I can go back. I know that some people say, or some documentation says, that if you want to go back, you simply set CV 8 to 8 and it goes back to the manufacturer's settings. Quite simple. But if it's a sound chip, that might not be a wise thing to do. If you want to go back on a sound chip, you just need to go and change the CVs that you've changed, because going back to the manufacturer's settings could well wipe out your sound. So always phone or contact the manufacturer or the production of the sound chip before you make any serious changes to it. For those of you that have been following this channel for some time, you'll know that I'm a user of the Digitrack system, but that's not where it all started. I originally started out dipping my toe in the bathtub of DCC using the Bachmann Dynamis. After a couple of months, I invested in the Pro Box, which is the component underneath the guy on the left-hand side, which enables you to read CVs as well as write them. So that's what I thought I'd use to show you how we're going to alter the performance and the behaviour of our subject item, which is this little bubble car, which is what we'll be using today. Now obviously I'm not going to show you exactly every button press on my Dynamis to show you how to change all these CVs. You have to get your own manual out with your own system, whether you're a Dynamis, whether you're a Digitrax or Lens, ZCT or whatever. You just need to get your own manual out and work it through one stage at a time. But as I mentioned earlier, you must write down what you do. Now the first thing I always do is I renumber the locomotives, as I'm sure you've probably done to yours. Sadly, a friend of mine, who I won't mention his name, he renames his locomotives, and they are 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 and so on. And every time he wants to move a locomotive, he says, is that 7 or is that 8? Or so it's easy just to use the numbers on the locomotive, and I always use the last 4. And this little bubble car, I believe, is 55002. So 5002 is the 4-digit address that I use, and I always use 4-digit addresses. Obviously, if it's a warship 812, then it's 812, so you don't necessarily have to have a 4-digit address, but that's the kind of default settings. So once you've decided to renumber them, because they all come with the NMRA standard of factory number 3, so you obviously need to move them away from 3. Once you've moved to your desired number, I think the best thing next best thing to do, is to change the speed steps. Now the speed steps can be in 14, I think 28, perhaps 64 or 128. Now if you go from the lowest speed step up to 128, you can see the difference. So if I set this locomotive off now at speed step 1 on 28, you can see the speed. But if I now change the speed steps to 128, then you can see it's considerably slower. And it's moving locomotives in your rolling stock at speeds such as this that make DCC far more desirable. So clearly now we're starting to alter the behaviour of the locomotive. Now if I zoom back and then just using the reverse key, if I just set it off, and if I just change the direction on the reverse key, as you can see, its acceleration and deacceleration is very, very quick. And you can't exactly call that prototypical. I'll bring the speed down a little bit as I'm doing it now. But even turning the speed down considerably, it still doesn't exactly stop and then restart. And that's the sort of behaviour that I wish to change on this now by altering the CVs. Now the acceleration and deceleration CVs are CV number 3 and CV number 4, and depending on which chip you've purchased, it may go from 0, which is the fastest, up to 63 or maybe 64, which is the slowest. Some sound chips go from 0 up to 255, so again it's a case of reading the manual of the chip and figuring it out from there. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to reprogram this CV3 from 0 up to 63 and show you the difference, but I won't touch CV4. Now you may be aware that when you program a locomotive, it tends to jerk as the program goes in. And there I know that the program's been accepted. If I come back out of the Dynamis, back to running the Loco now, and zoom back a little bit, and then set the locomotive off, that's at full speed. And as you can see, the acceleration is much more prototypical. However, when I stop it, it stops instantly again, so it shows you that the deacceleration hasn't changed, only the acceleration, which is CV3, because I haven't touched CV4. So now what I'll do is change CV4 to the same level. Again, as I program it, you'll probably see it jump around a little bit, and then we're good to go. So now, when we set it off, and then I reverse it, it keeps going, and then it will stop. It sets off in the other direction. I'll press reverse, and it slows down and then comes back. You might say that's far more prototypical. For me, it's just a little bit too slow. So I'm going to reset both of those now to level 20. Okay, that's them both CV4 and CV3 programmed at level 20. So if I set it off now and I reverse it, you can see that it slows down before it changes direction. And then instead of reversing it, I'll just turn the power off. And it comes to a much more prototypical halt. I'll just run it back the other way and then turn the power off. So that's all straightforward really. The only thing you now need to be aware of is when you turn the speed down, of course the locomotive isn't going to stop and may well run straight into the buffers. But that's the beauty of DC. C, of course, is you're driving the train and you're not driving the track. In DC, you just turn the voltage up and down and the locomotive zips off in whichever direction you've selected. But with careful usage of CVs 3 and 4, you get a much better prototypical feel and acceleration. If you've got a great big old Class 37 pulling a coal train, you might want a very, very slow acceleration if that's the locomotive that you always use when pulling that train. So using the minimum acceleration of say 63 might be absolutely ideal. The same might be said for an HST unit, but actually they accelerate reasonably quickly. So, you know, it's just a case of working it out to suit your needs. One thing to remember, of course, is if anything's got to start to go wrong on your layout, when you hit this kill switch, everything stops dead. It doesn't kind of run on another, 3 or 4 meters into the buffers or into the station. When you hit the kill switch, it will still stop everything dead. So whatever you've plumbed in, well, you know, into these CVs, it will still work perfectly well. That kind of is all I wanted to say today about CVs, but there is a great deal more to it. You can change CV2 for a minimum speed. I think you can go CV5, is it for a maximum speed? So that if you're running a layout, say at an exhibition, and it's a tail chaser, and you don't want them running your locos at, flat out, so they'll be, hoofing the coaches off around the bends, then you can curb the top end of the speed, which kind of makes sense. And it also makes sense, like say for a loco, that 37 pulling the coal train, it's clearly not going to be doing 90 mile an hour. It might barely be doing 50. So you can adjust the CVs to suit your layout. If you're into sound, then you can adjust the volume up and down so that your DMU will be quieter than your Class 47 or whatever. So you get a much more prototypical feel to your sound layout. Anyway, hopefully that was some use to you, and if you're into CVs, then it might take you a stage further. There are very complicated bits of CVs, and I haven't even touched on them here, but if you want me to go into it in a greater depth, I will. Just leave a little comment in the comment section below, and if there's any other subject you'd like me to cover, again, pop them into the comment section. In the meantime, there should be a subscribe button about here, and there may be a video here and here to take you on. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and maybe ring the bell. Catch you later. Thanks a lot. Take care and bye-bye.